Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Spirit of Liberty broadcast. Appreciate you joining me live this afternoon. Hope you get a blessing from the program today. Oh, man, and I did it again. I forgot to mute the background. So I always enjoy doing these in the afternoon, and a lot of important subjects geared towards men if you haven't been tuning into these. But this one, too, there's definitely things for the ladies, too. But I do want to kind of deal with it more specifically when it comes to young men, and that is protecting them in cyberspace, or preparing them for that world of cyberspace. All things computers, internet. Our world is more and more online today, and there are a lot of great dangers that are out there, and a lot of young people are not prepared for these things. And specifically, I do think there are areas where Christian and homeschool kids are kind of at even greater danger where we don't even realize it. And so while there's something for everyone here, where I really kind of want to take this is towards people who are Christians and who have young men. And if you're homeschooling your kids, there's some things that you need to prep for, because one of the things that we are seeing is more and more young people who grew up in Christian homes. They were sheltered from the things of this world and the public school and all those things. They are still getting in big trouble, and sometimes it's almost worse with them. And I think there's some very good reasons for that. So appreciate everyone joining. Let me know if the audio and everything's all good, but it's good to have Dermot McQuaid, Deutsch Mathlehrer. I'm probably saying that wrong. It looks German, I guess. And then Isaiah in the live chat so far. Appreciate you guys joining us. If you have any questions too, again, I try to pay attention to live chat. A lot of times I get sidetracked and so focused on what I'm talking about that I don't see what's going on. But we will make an attempt. And if I don't answer anything, I'm probably not ignoring you. I'm probably just sidetracked. I can typically only stay focused on one thing at a time. Just kind of how my brain works. But one of the things that got me really thinking about the subject, I had another subject I was wanting to do today, but really got interested in this subject and wanted to cover it. I heard a story this week about a young man. I'm not going to show it on the screen, but I'm going to read it. It was someone from Upper Michigan. It's an Upper Michigan teen's death is bringing sextortion to light. Investigators say 17-year-old Jordan DeMay's suicide was linked to it. And that was a word that I was not familiar with yet, but I've got a feeling it's one people are going to become familiar with, because this kind of thing is becoming more and more common. And it's extortion, but basically, it's something that's done online. And what we're going to see happen, young people are being fooled, and sometimes even adults, into sharing, inappropriate photos of themselves to someone online. And then they are threatened to have it used against them to try to get money from or whatever. But this is a story of a young man who's only 17. This happened to him, and he ended up killing himself. He was so upset. So it says just hours before his death, it says, that cycle of victimization where that fear is so embedded in you that they are going to distribute those pictures, said Michael Sewall, Internet Crimes Against Children investigator for the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office. It can push people to the brink. Just hours before his death, Marquette investigators believed DeMay was the victim of blackmail through social media. They say the teen was being extorted through Instagram over pictures he had taken of himself, and was pressured by the perpetrator to pay money in exchange for the pictures not being sent to his family and Instagram followers. That's what sextortion is, and experts say it is happening more and more these days. And one thing about young people, and we take this for granted as adults, it's like we just assume they're going to know not to do certain things, or we assume that they're just these good kids that never would do such a thing. You never want to just assume your kid's not going to do something. That's not really a good policy to have. And especially when they're becoming a teenager or junior higher, and they just kind of go brain dead for a while, especially boys, and you have no idea what they might do. And understand they can get themselves in trouble in ways that they don't realize. And so, no, they don't have common sense. They really don't. And, so you've got to make sure before you give them access to something like that, that they are capable of understanding, what can happen. The way I hear it illustrated a lot, it's like a gun. You shouldn't just give a gun to a kid. Somebody who's got, I believe in the right to keep and bear arms, but I also believe in gun control, meaning you need to know how to control that thing. You need to know how to use it. You need to know how to only shoot when you want it to shoot and hit what you want it to hit. And that, you need to make sure that you don't just hand that to anyone, because it's a very dangerous weapon that can do great harm to others, and you can even do great harm to yourself if you're not careful. You cannot have accidents with a gun. It's not okay. It was an accident. I didn't mean to. You've got to train yourself. You've got to know how to handle that piece of equipment, because there is great damage. We do the same thing with cars. We have them do driver's education. We have them go through all this training. Why? Because there's a great deal of damage that can be done with a vehicle. Vehicles aren't bad. Guns aren't bad. The internet is not bad. But there is great danger, things that can happen, and we need to warn people about dangers. There's great danger that can happen out on the road. So you prepare people for it, and people aren't preparing their young men and their young girls for the dangers of the internet. And there's a lot of pervs out there that will try to take advantage of them. And a lot of times, not thinking straight, they end up doing things that they greatly regret. And so it says on this article, we believe that children are sending more explicit images simply because they have been locked down for the last 2 years. Program manager for the National Criminal Justice Training Center at Fox Valley Technical College, Joe Laramie, said, another problem with the lockdown, another side effect of it, but part of it too is we're just getting more and more wicked, have less and less morals. But sextortion predators can prey on young children and teens just for explicit photos. In the case of DeMay, officials say it was a manipulation to get money, which DeMay did send, but it wasn't enough. And it never is enough. And kids, you ever get yourself in this kind of trouble, you got to go tell your parents, all right? Don't ever get yourself in this kind of trouble. But if you do, you always tell somebody, because it's never going to be enough, said Laramie. If you send more images, you send more money, whatever it is, it's never going to be enough. They're always going to ask for more. Seawall says more often than not, the threats these predators give are nothing more than empty threats. If they fail the first time, they won't actually do anything about it. All they want is that threat, Sewell said. They stir up that fear hormone inside the people and say, I'm going to post it to your friends and your family. And they give them a list of all the websites they're going to use, and they'll send screenshots and maybe things that the victims already sent to them, and say, this is what I'm going to use to send to people. But a lot of times they don't actually end up sending it out to anyone. However, hours after Jordan's death, a friend of Jordan's did actually receive one of the compromising photos. That's why kids have got to understand, anything you do online, you just need to do it with the understanding that it can and probably will be seen by the world. And if you don't want the world seeing it, don't put it on there. And that includes texts that you send to your closest friend. The whole world could see. They say, well, my friend would never share it with anybody. They could lose their phone. One of their other friends who doesn't like you might look through that phone and find something. These things are there, and you've got to understand they can ruin you. They can destroy your reputation, and these things are not going to go away. So you have to, you've got to take all those things in consideration. And parents, if you're going to let your kids have a cell phone, you need to let them or help them understand everything that you do on here can and probably will be used against you. Somebody's going to find the things that you're saying and the things you're doing and the pictures that you're sending. You can put a lock on your phone and a password and all that kind of stuff. Doesn't matter. Chances are you're going to get caught, and everybody should just have that assumption. I'm going to get caught. Whatever you're doing on your phone, your computer, you're going to get caught. So, just don't do anything bad, and nothing to worry about. But, there's temptations. Okay, I get it. There's temptations, But at the same time, one of the things that deters us from giving into those temptations is understanding what could potentially happen. And imagine thinking that you're sending some pictures to some girl you're trying to impress, and to find out it's some dude, and that he's going to send it to everybody. He's going to post it online, and you're going to see everybody looking at these things. Maybe you go to public school and they're going to be sharing it around. They're going to be passing these things around. They're going to be commenting on it. You're going to be being made fun of for it. These things can potentially happen. And we like to, and in these articles, they like to hammer the people who, talk about it, share it, bully, all that kind of stuff. But let me tell you, scumbags are always going to be out there. Bad people are always going to be out there. Cyber bullies, they're always going to be out there. You can't give them anything, so just don't do these things. And we're not going to read the rest of this article, but it's just basically warning about the dangers. People are committing suicide over things like that. And you know what, parents, again, you think, my kid would never do that. You don't know how this stuff is going to affect them. You don't know that, there's no way of knowing for sure how they're going to react, how they're going to respond. There's a lot of things to be considered. And you know what, most of the time, and when a teenager commits suicide over stuff like this, the parents never saw it coming. And so sadly, it's just the way it is. And you find out what the reality of things when it's too late. So, before you allow your kids computers, cell phones, whatever, you need to make sure they understand these things. We see some statistics here about cyberbullying. It says 90% of teens in the U.S. believe cyber harassment is a problem. I definitely believe it is. Okay. I do think the word bullying gets thrown around quite a bit, but I will say, I'm somebody who's had a great deal of junk said about me on the internet. A great deal of lies out there, websites in my name just trying to harass me. And I can handle it because I'm an adult, I'm mature, I get it. But those same people that do that kind of junk with me also do it with kids. They do it with teenagers many times, and they're not mature enough to get over it. And at least too, in the cases of me being bullied, for lack of a better term, online, harassed, whatever, in the cases where it's happened with me, it's been where I've been in the right. It's been because of what I preach. It's been because of stands that I've taken. And so we've got plenty of warning in the scriptures that kind of thing is going to happen. People are going to lie about you, all that kind of stuff. So, that doesn't really affect me. Now, if it was because of something bad that I've done, if I was suffering as an evildoer, okay, then, that would be hard. If I was seeing all this junk being said about me online because of sin, well, it would probably make me feel really bad. I don't think I'd kill myself, but again, I'm older, mature, all that kind of stuff. Young people aren't. So it's a huge thing. But 15% of young cyberbullying victims would prefer to keep the issue a secret. And a lot of times they feel really bad. They don't want to hurt their parents. They don't want their parents to know because they're afraid the parents are going to jump down their throat. And so they don't tell them. And that's not a good thing. Students are almost twice as likely to attempt suicide if they have been cyberbullied. And I read another story this week about a 12-year-old girl that committed suicide over cyberbullying. And, kids. What are all these little kids doing on the internet, communicating on the internet, sending texts and sending these things around? And there was all this junk going around about her people, making fun of her appearance, all these things. And the mom found this 12-year-old girl hung. What a tragic story. And folks, people can be cruel online. People are horrible online. And let me tell you, the amount of just, attacks that are online. It's so funny too, because it's so, in real life, most people, they're going to be careful around you because you can punch them in the nose. But online, you can't really do anything. So they have nothing stopping them. And they are just as cruel as they can possibly be. It's crazy. These people are cowards. One of the biggest things I've learned to get people to leave me alone online, especially in the Baptist world or in the preacher world, is you just send them your phone number. Okay, there's a lot of preachers out there. I've seen some of this on Twitter and even other places where they love to talk about you, and then they'll like attack you online in these public forums, but dare them to call you. And I've sent people private messages sending them my phone number. They're done after that. You know why? Because it's easy to get bold and tough online. People like the show. People like watching an attack. And that's why, too, you have why cyberbullying is popular is it does get a lot of attention online. People love drama. People love seeing a good argument. And so, those Facebook posts and things where people are arguing, they get all kinds of attention. Everybody wants to look at that. Everybody wants to watch the fight in school. Whenever the two people get in a fight, there's always a big crowd that gathers around. And it's the same thing online. And that's why a lot of people, too, they're preaching. It's just full of picking fights, calling people out, naming this, naming that, trying to bring up any drama they can, because that's the only way they can get a crowd, because they don't have any substance to any of their actual preaching. So it's typically the drama type stuff, and it does. And the crazies all come out to it. The crazies are all there. They're going to watch that, cheering it on, saying junk, egging it on, and it's worse online than anywhere else in the world. 80% of teens say that others cyberbully because they think it's funny. They enjoy watching these things. It's entertaining for them to see someone else suffering. It's because these are sick people. 37% of bullying victims develop social anxiety. 59% of U.S. teenagers have experienced bullying or harassment online. 14.5% of children between the ages of 9 and 12 have been cyberbullied, and 66.3% of tweens tried to help the victim of cyberbullying. That's good. Some people try to, reach out and help, but at the end of the day, it's one of those things that, this stuff shouldn't be happening online, but it is. It's just the reality. And so you've got to understand, if you are going to be a part of the online world, and especially if you're going to let your young people go on there, you are going to have to train them. You are going to have to prepare them, for what's out there, because it's a dangerous place. And I don't care how good your kid is, it is real easy to get caught up in this stuff, and they can still be a good kid, but there's bad people that are on there, bad people that are going to take advantage of you, that are going to exploit you, that are going to try to push you into being just as bad as they are. The mob, we all know mobs are dangerous today, physical mobs, but online too. You have mobs that form, and you get like this mob mentality, and people just get crazy. People, when they're in a mob, they do things that they would never do on their own. We saw a lot of examples of that in 2020 when all the riots and things were going on. People, when they get in a pack, they're kind of like, dogs. They're kind of like coyotes. A coyote by itself is going to leave you alone. But you know what? You get a pack of them together, all of a sudden they start getting bold. And so the thing is, cowards tend to, congregate together and create these groups and just like to chew on flesh. And they are all over in the online world. And so it's a very, very dangerous place. And, young people seeing these things, online on social media, it does a lot more damage than many times for several reasons. Okay. And again, sometimes we as adults, we see through a lot of these things, and then we don't think much of it because of the fact that we can kind of see through it, because through our experience, we have a little more wisdom. Kids don't have this. So first off, they're young. They don't have life experience. They don't understand that this too will pass. All these people that are talking about them, they think it's just the end of the world. They don't understand, like you do, that these people that are online running their mouths, saying all this junk, are people with miserable lives with no futures. While you don't have to be pathetic. You don't have to be miserable. You do have a future. everybody's going to forget about this junk, and eventually the coyotes are going to be chewing on somebody else. So just, write it out. And, and I said, occasionally we get the online attacks that come our way. And, one thing I've just learned, whether they're Christian attacks, whether they're sodomite attacks, they're all in a pack mentality like a dog. And you know what? Eventually they get distracted and they move on. And so it gets to where it just doesn't even faze you anymore. And so, but young people don't understand that. They think this is going to be a problem I'm dealing with forever. Everyone's going to be talking about this forever. Young people, they live in a very small world. Their world is very small. And, when they see these things online, it's everything to them because it's about them and they think the whole world's seeing it. And the truth is, there's probably not a ton of people seeing it, but their whole world maybe is. If it's their family or their friends, that's their whole world. And so it freaks them out. They're often too scared to talk to their parents because, they feel like the situation is much bigger to them than it actually is. And a lot of times maybe they don't think that you could even do anything about it, or they just think they're going to be in more trouble. And so you got to watch out for that. Okay. I'm not telling you, listen, your kid does something inappropriate online. You should come down on them hard. But at the same time too, you need to make sure that they understand that, the punishments that you give are to prevent them from dealing with much greater consequences, because the consequences that can come from these things are far beyond anything that you could do. I mean, how would you like it if your child ended up being one of these kids that were bullying some little girl that went and killed themselves? And we've seen that happen before where, things have been made public that had been going on online where something like that happened. And then all of a sudden names start getting out of these kids and things, and parents and communities, they all start just, threatening those people. And then all of a sudden you've got the parents of the little cyberbully acting like they're a victim. And, I don't think, when some kid gets caught up in doing that, I don't think we ought to go to their houses with torches and pitchforks. I don't think we ought to be doing threats and everything, but just understand, I have a tough time feeling sorry for you and looking at your kid as a victim. They're dealing with the consequences of horrible actions and horrible cruelty, and you can't be that way. So, but again, it's easy for kids to get caught up in that. Oh, I don't like this kid. Everybody's piling on him. Let me pile on him too. Man, you can't do that. You don't know what that kid is going to do and how it's going to affect them. So kids they don't have the life experience to be able to understand the potential problems that can come from one mistake online. And a lot of times with some kids, it was just one mistake. It was one picture. It was one comment. It was just one, time of bad judgment. It was one young guy at a moment when his hormones just take over and his brain goes into shutdown mode. He does one thing that he immediately regretted, but now he's just suffering for it. But again, that's the danger that's out there. You got to prepare your kids for it. And so something that is very common in Christian homes, and especially too in a lot of homeschool homes, where kids, they're not around, public school kids, or they're not introduced to certain things like other kids are, is often when these parents, they think because they're strict, their kids are going to turn out good, and there's always those people in the church that they're the most strict. They've got the highest standards. They've got the strictest rules, and it's like everything they do is just to try to one up everybody when it comes to standards, rules, or whatever. Okay. Now the reason that they have to do it that way, so if your daughters, have to have a skirt 1 inch below the knee, their daughters is going to be 2 inches. Okay. Now, why are they doing that? Because they don't know how to actually turn out a good family. So they think if I just one up everybody, I'll do better. But it's not about the rules. It's about the spirit of things. And I've preached a lot on this. And I'm actually probably going to be preaching a message pretty soon. It'll probably be a few weeks on this subject that I'm about to talk about, because it's really important that people understand this, because this is happening a lot. But they think I'm strict, therefore everything's going to be okay. I've got the hardest rules. Most people, they let their kids get a cell phone when they're 13. I'm going to wait till my kids are 16. Or I'm going to wait till my kids are 18, And they always, again, just trying to one-up everybody. They don't know why. They don't really have a plan. They think it's all about, I just set this rule and everything's fine. But at the same time, one thing we're seeing is kids from the strictest homes many times, as soon as they become adults, become some of the biggest scumbags. Worse than the world, many times. Now, why is that? Now, folks, I've been in this thing for quite a while, okay? I've grown up in church. I went to one church for 23 years straight. I've been pastoring this church now for almost 11 years, so I've had time to watch people and observe a few things. I was a youth director for a long time. I've watched many people transition from teenager to adult, and you learn a few things along the way. But one thing I've learned, I think one of the reasons we see young people who are super sheltered go just completely crazy once they become an adult is because they never learn how to regulate anything in their life. They never actually were trained. They never actually learned any kind of discipline in their life. And so parents do. They think strict rules are the answer. So I'm going to find the hardest preacher with the most extreme rules, and I'm just going to do everything he says. There's a lot more to it than that. Okay? And you want to know who's always the most extreme and on everything? It's either the guy with no kids or the one who has really little kids. Okay? Because he doesn't know what he's doing either. So he's just thinking strictness is the answer. I'm going to go to this crazy extreme, and then, that will make me turn out good kids. Not necessarily, okay? Strict rules, they are fine and wonderful. I think it's better to be strict than to have no rules at all. But strict rules without character development will accomplish nothing. And sometimes, too, it even makes things worse, okay? Now, just to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about, let me show you some pictures that will remind you of the last couple of years, all right? Do y'all remember these people? All right, we all remember these people. Now, I think some of these things are people exaggerating to make a point, but at the same time, they weren't really going that far in their exaggerations, okay? We've all been dealing with this for the last 2 years. These are what I like to call COVIDiots. And here is probably the greatest COVIDiot that has ever lived. Our president, with maybe the one exception of Matthew McConaughey, the guy whose career obviously is not doing good, so he's been pandering to the left as much as possible. Here he takes a picture out in the desert in the middle of nowhere, all by himself, wearing his face diaper. Okay? Now, we all remember what it was like the last few years where they literally thought a lockdown was a good idea to protect people from the flu. They thought putting masks on people was a good idea, to just go and keep everyone away from everybody. That's going to help everyone's immunities. Okay, it was one of the dumbest things ever. And if you were duped by it, you know what? People forgive you. Just admit you're duped. But at the same time, everyone should feel stupid who went along with all the foolishness the last few years. And sadly, there's still a few people out there, wearing the face diapers, all that stuff. But here's why this was so dumb. You're trying to protect people from a virus, but then you go and you lock people down for months and months and months. You have them live in a bubble. You know what you're doing? You're lowering their immunities. And the thing is, eventually, they're going to have to step out into civilization again. Eventually, people are going to have to be around other people again. And the thing is, you've sheltered them so much, they now don't have any immunity to anything. And guess what? They end up reacting the worst. It's always the germaphobes, that are the most sick. It's always the people who hide from germs the most that are sick all the time. The people, I mean, I've seen this my whole life. Okay, the people, every church, the people who miss the most for sickness are the people who are the most, quote unquote, healthy. The biggest germaphobes, the ones that do everything all natural, all that kind of stuff, they're always the worst. I've never followed these people's leads because I do not want to be sick as much as these people. They don't know what they're doing. And it's the same thing when it comes to, living in this world. Okay, we've got to just get a hold of the fact and just accept the fact we are always going to live in a world where there are viruses. We're always going to live in a world where people can get sick. And you know what? We're always going to live in the world where there is sin. Until after the millennial kingdom, that's how it's going to be. There's going to be sin. There's going to be potential dangers that are out there. And you know what? Just like we need an immune system to fight the viruses and things that are out there, we need to have a strong immune system spiritually to fight the sins of the world and to fight the junk that's out there that's trying to affect us. But you know what? A lot of Christian parents are saying, let's put our kids in a bubble. Let's put them in a bubble, and then they'll never be affected by any of those nasty viruses and things that are out there. That's foolish. You put these kids in a bubble until they're 18, and then you send them out into the world, and you expect the sicknesses of the world out there to not affect them. You know what? They're going to affect them more. They're going to be affected even worse on them. And that's how it was. The people who followed the guidance of the government were locking themselves down, wearing the masks, doing all these things. They're the ones that are getting the most sick after it's all done. All right, because first off, what they didn't make any sense. And so one of the things that I have seen, I have watched, I have observed over and over again, many times the people who are the most strict turn out the worst kids. You know why? Because all they're doing is putting them in a bubble, and they're not doing anything to build and develop their character. And we were having a conversation yesterday with my wife and my boys, and we were talking about, and I'm going to make some people mad with this, but you know what? You need to hear it. You need to deal with it. Something that we said when we started homeschooling our kids. We said, we are going to homeschool our kids, but we are not going to be a homeschool family. And what we meant by that, we are not going to be that stereotypical homeschool family of people that think they're better than everybody else, self-righteous, over-the-top spirituality, over-the-top strictness. Why? The reason we weren't going to be like that is because they always turn out freaks. They always turn out the worst kids in the world. And I'm telling you why. It's because these kids, they've never had any character develop. They've never had any challenges. But then the parents think they did a good job. Oh, my kid's 18 and he's never done this. He's never said that. He's obviously a good kid. He's not like those other 18-year-olds in the public school. And the thing is, a lot of those kids in the public school, while they've done things that they shouldn't have done, they've also, they've been exposed to a lot of junk that they figured out just through common sense. This is bad. They've actually seen, kids that have had problems with drugs, kids that have gotten in trouble because of sexual relationships and pregnancies and all these things. And so a lot of them, even if they're not saved, they're like, you know what? I don't want that. I'm going to be careful. Where your kid has no idea. And then all of a sudden he gets a little freedom, and then, man, he's just all over everything because he has no idea what it could do. And their behavior, it can become very reckless. And they do horrible things and are often the worst ones. And I've seen Christian homeschool kids that even as teenagers, they talk worse, they act worse than a lot of lost kids do in the public schools. Why is that? Because these kids, they grew up in a bubble, and then as soon as they got exposed to sin, man, did they get a nasty case of that sin. They got it real bad. Why? Because they have no immune system. They've not developed any character to be able to fight these things, off like we should. So, Um, so, one of the so the thing, again, it's no character development. So now the question is, so what do we look for as a parent? All right. What is something that we should look at, as a parent? How can I know, because my kid's never done anything. He's never done drugs. He's never smoked. He's never drank. He's never cussed. And he's probably because he doesn't even know the cuss words. Your kid's never drank because it's never been put in front of him. Yeah, he's never looked at anything bad on the internet because he's never been on the internet. So great. Your son's got a whole bunch of I nevers that he could say, but that doesn't mean he has any character at all. So the thing is, a lot of parents, they think they're successful if they can get their kids to adulthood saying they never did this, and this. But the problem is, just like eventually we all had to come out of hiding and go into a world where Rona's around, eventually your kids are going to go out there in the world. They are going to go online. They're going to get a cell phone. What's going to happen to them when they do? Are they going to be like some of these homeschool kids that were innocent who just immediately just become absolute scum, involved in pornography and everything quickly? Is that, how can you know, what are the warning signs? Well, I believe there's a few warning signs, okay? And these things too are based off experience. And so I'm not really preaching the Bible part of this. I might get into some of the scriptures. I'm kind of saving it though, because as I started doing this, I ended up putting a sermon together about riotous children. Some of you think that riot means like out in the community smashing windows, burning things down. And of course, that is rioting. But in the Bible, when it talks about being riotous and, children accused of riot, there's more to it than just that. Okay. Just because your kids aren't out marching with Black Lives Matter does not mean they're not riotous. And it's an interesting study when you look at it. But here are some things that you need to look at with your innocent little children to find out, if they are prepared for these things. What are they going to do when they are exposed to certain sins? So signs too that your son is not prepared for cyberspace, and don't get offended with me, but you might have noticed the kid I used in the picture starting out here. All right, chubby little kid, stuff in his face, looking at the computer. All right, is your kid a glutton? Okay, glutton. Now, we don't talk about that a lot, and that word's not even in the Bible that much. But you know what? It's a really bad sign when your child has no ability to just regulate himself in anything. What happens and so one of the ways you can find out if your kid has the type of character that he's going to be someone who's online looking at pornography, doing all that junk, is he somebody, do you have to lock your refrigerator at night? Is he sneaking food? Is he, and you say, well, that's not that big of a deal. Listen, willful disobedience is a big deal. Being greedy is a big deal. Being selfish is a big deal. And that's just a really bad sign. Okay. Gluttony is not a good thing. It's something that it shows a major lack of character, and we're not supposed to be that way. We see in the Bible. The atheists, they love to do the same thing with the passage that the novice preachers do about the son who is a glutton and a drunkard. They act like it's a little kid disobeying his parents. No, this is a glutton and a drunkard. Okay, this is somebody who has no self-control. Somebody who is just indulging whatever he can get. If your child has no ability to regulate himself, they don't know when to just stop. Something as simple as eating. If when they get a hold of soda, they're just chugging it till they're sick, eating till they throw up. Just all that kind of, that's a bad sign. And you know what? You need to be concerned about that. And a lot of times people today, they're concerned about the obesity and kids and all that for the health reasons. And obviously health is a huge part of that, but I think we should be thinking about the character things too. A lot of them, it's a sign of no character. And all of a sudden, these kids, they can't even control themselves around food. And then you think you're going to give them the internet and they're going to be able to control themselves. Because understand, the things people are getting in trouble with are things that our flesh desires. And your child who's never said no to a candy bar, one who will go as far as taking it when he's not supposed to, he probably doesn't have the character that one should have when they're going to go online. So again, yeah, he's not a drunkard, he's not a fornicator, but at the same time, there's a good chance once that's presented to him, he's probably going to indulge in it because he doesn't say no to anything. And so I get it. These might seem like small things, but these are signs of a bigger problem. Is he lazy? Is he lazy like that, that glutton and drunkard that the parents brought before the congregation? They said to stone. Is he a lazy good for nothing? Do you have to drag him out of bed every morning? Is he okay? Does he, is his character so bad that he doesn't see a problem, with sleeping in all day, watching TV all day? Would he play video games all night if you would let him? You say, well, any kid would do that. I think at some point they would, but you have to teach them character. You have to teach them that it is wrong to do something like that. And let me tell you, when I was a kid, I liked playing video games. I wanted to play video, but at the same time too, I was also ashamed to play video games too long. Why? My dad put that in me. That, it was a shame to just sit around playing video games all day. And I remember there was one time where I sat down, and it was on a summer day, and I had played video games all day. And it was probably in reality an equivalent to what a lot of kids do on a normal day. I did it for one day, and it was just one of these days that just kind of got away from me. And when I realized how long I've been playing, I remember just thinking, man, if my parents find out, they are going to kill me. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. And I never did that again. Because I was taught that was a shame, where a lot of kids, they're not ashamed of it. And they would. If it wasn't for mom and dad coming into their bedroom and shutting the TV off, there's no telling how long they would be playing it. That's not good. Okay? That is a bad sign right there. And so you need to do some educating there. You need to be teaching people some things. And so is your child excessive on everything they do? Sometimes kids, their behavior gets bad, but is yours taking it over are they over the top? Kids, sometimes they're mean, they don't get along with their brothers and sisters, but again, we've all seen somebody lose their temper, but do they take it kind of to another level? Do they go to an extreme? And so in the Bible, let me go ahead and show you a few verses, because we all know about the qualifications of a bishop. And Titus 1:6 says, if any be blameless, a husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly. Okay, and again, what does that word riot mean? Does that mean they're out busting windows and things like that? 1 Peter 4:3 says, for the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles when we walked in lasciviousness, lust, excess of wines, revelings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries, wherein they think it strange that ye run not with them to the same excess of riot, speaking evil of you. Again, going to excess. That's what it means about riot. People that are just kind of going to an extreme. Okay, a definition we see in the Bible, it's like debauchery is a word that is used, or luxury is also in there. In 2 Peter 2:12, It says, but these as natural brute beasts, made to be taken and destroyed, speak evil of things that they understand not, shall utterly perish in their own corruption, and shall receive the reward of unrighteousness, as they count it pleasure to riot in the daytime. Spots they are, blemishes, sporting themselves with their own deceivings, while they feast with you, having eyes full of adultery that cannot cease from sin, beguiling unstable souls at heart. They have exercised with covetous practices, cursed children. So we see that that riot, it's just kind of a debauchery. It's an excess. It's people just going to an extreme. And obviously when people are rioting in today's definition of just going and smashing things up and doing all those things, that's just, that's an appropriate word, because what are these people doing? They're just going to an extreme when they're angry about something. And they've got nothing stopping them, nothing controlling them. When they get in a big group, when they get in a big pack, they feel emboldened because nobody can stop us. So then we see their true heart, what they really want to do. And what do they want to do? They want to destroy. They want to harm people. They want to shed blood. And that's what happens in these riots. But that same character, it's the same thing when someone feels that there's nothing regulating them, no one can control them, I'm doing exactly what I feel like doing. You know what? That's riot, and that's excess too. And a lot of people are doing that online with their behavior, the things they're viewing, the way they're talking, the way they're treating people in that mob mentality that you see. And this is wicked stuff. It's very wicked stuff. And so the definition of riot, it kind of depends on, what's going on a lot of times. We see there's a lot of different definitions. And 1828 means uproar, wild and noisy festivity. Another definition, excessive and expensive feasting. Luxury is another one too. They just got to have it all. They've got to have everything. Another definition, to banquet, to live in luxury, to enjoy. And you know what's interesting about that? In Luke 15 verse 13, talking about the prodigal, says, in many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. And that didn't mean he was out busting windows, burning places down. No, he was living luxuriously. And one of the definitions too of riot is literally, I've got it in here somewhere, but a word that it uses is prodigal, wasteful. So that a lot of times we think riot is just destroying things, but it's just being excessive. It's not having any control, no regulation on your life. And so when you give your child something, what do they do with it? If when you give your child some money, do they spend it all immediately? It's a bad sign. Or are they foolish? Are they foolish with it, or are they wise with it? These are things you got to be looking at. You need to develop character in your child. You need to teach them these things. And a lot of parents, all they're teaching their kids is, you can't do this, you can't do that. We're strict here, we're strict there. No, you need to actually develop some character in your kids, because one of these days, the tools are going to be given to him. One of these days, he's going to get a cell phone. One of these days, he's going to get a computer. One of these days, he's going to have some money. He's going to be able to go and buy whatever he wants. Is he going to be responsible? Is he going to save that money? Is he going to pay his bills with that money? Or is he going to go for immediate gratification? And is he going to go to the bar? Is he going to go buy drugs? Is he going to go, what's he going to do with it? Is he going to waste it on these things? Is he going to be a prodigal? And I'm telling you right now, one of the things that I'm seeing that I've noticed just from observing people is I've seen a lot of kids who were very innocent, who never did anything. They were very sheltered. Their parents were really strict. And the ones that turned out really bad, one of the things that, you look back because you wonder, what happened? Where'd they go wrong? And you saw where they couldn't control themselves on the littlest things. They go somewhere where, a lot of parents are strict with their kids in soda. That's great. But then those same kids, if mom and dad's not around, are chugging it like there's no tomorrow. That's a red flag right there. You say, man, you are making such a big deal about just a kid drinking a bunch of soda. I'm making a big deal about a kid not having any character. And you know what? Kids are going to try some of that stuff. You know, when my kids were little, they would do, they do things like that, go to some kind of extreme. So you know what we would do? We would deal with it. We would recognize, hey, this is a bad sign. We would teach them they should be ashamed of just, eating a ton of candy and stuffing their faces like an animal, drinking a ton of soda, playing video games for hours, watching TV. We bash that stuff like crazy because people need to be ashamed. And some people, their solution is, well, my kids just don't watch any TV. Okay. I mean, if that's your standard, that's fine. But you know what? If you don't teach your kids some character, if they don't develop some character, one of these days, they're going to get a hold of a TV and they're going to have no ability to regulate themselves with it. And they are going to watch whatever, anything. I remember one of the strictest families I ever saw growing up. I mean, strict across the board on everything. A while back, I looked these people up on Facebook, started finding all the kids, and their kids, all of them, have turned out horrible. I mean, absolutely terrible. I'm looking at all the boys. I remember we went to their house, and they were like, of course, all organic, all natural. They grew a lot of their own food, and they made us this meal, and it was disgusting. I remember they gave us corn on the cob, right from the corn stalk, but there was like no salt, no butter, and it was like they were insulted to ask for salt. But everything, I remember there just tasted so bland, and they were so strict, they were so healthy, they weren't even allowed to enjoy their food, but you know what? You go look at their boys' Facebook, they're all drinking. They've all got cans of beer. Great. Your kids weren't allowed to eat salt growing up, but now they're drinking beer. You really accomplished something there. You know what? These kids had, and I remember too, we went over to their house one time and they had videoed this big turtle that came in their yard. And I remember they wanted us to see the video of this turtle. So they went and made a big deal to like go to the closet and wheel this television out. And I remember they wheeled this crummy television out of their closet. They keep in a closet. And like when they did, the kids went crazy. I mean, they were like cheering. They got all excited and they were like, this is, they were telling us how great it was going to be. And they showed us a home video of a turtle in their backyard. And I remember as a kid thinking, this is boring. This is super weird. These kids are that excited about pulling the TV out so they can watch a home video of a turtle. Okay? Now, you know why they're excited? Because these kids never get TV. Just like some of your kids, they get super excited when they get soda because they've never had soda before. But do you see how no TV is not what makes a good kid? I'm not telling you watching TV is going to make you have a good kid. Chances are it's not really going to help them out a whole lot. But I am just telling you, just removing these things from their life without developing character in them is going to be absolutely pointless. And then one of these days, when they finally have to be exposed to these things, they will be worse off than a lot of kids that grew up in worldly homes. And it's the case. A lot of these, kids with these innocent eyes that have never seen anything, as soon as they become an adult, they're the ones immediately addicted to porn, while these other kids whose parents let them watch PG-13 and R-rated movies and stuff, they're not doing that. What's going on? It's because some of those kids, even though they're lost and their parents didn't have very good rules, and they've definitely got some, areas where they're defiled, they actually have some character too. And so I think we're going to keep seeing this kind of thing of Christian kids, homeschool kids, becoming adults and becoming the Josh Duggars of the world. I'm not shocked. The Josh Duggar stuff doesn't surprise me at all. That movement, that's an example too of the homeschool family that we didn't want to be. But they are the ones that turn out people like that, because it is very clear that from a young age, that boy had no character at all in his life. yeah, his parents were super strict on stuff. There was a lot of stuff that but boy, he clearly had something broken in him that should have been dealt with a very long time ago. And so all those things that I mentioned about your kid being a glutton, lazy, just playing video games for hours with no ability to regulate themselves, you know, it might sound like I'm nitpicking a little bit, but no, these are signs. These are things that should concern you. Is your child, is he mean to people? How does he treat other people, especially when no one's looking? You know, and sometimes you miss these things as a parent. But, you know, if you're finding out your kid treats people bad, talks nasty to people, man, that's a really bad sign. Wait till they get their hands on more dangerous tools. They're probably going to do a lot of damage with them. And so you got to watch out for that. So, you know, let your kids make sure they understand the dangers that are out there in cyberspace and the online world. They can get themselves in so much trouble. And then too, as a parent, you have to really watch your kids, and you have to make sure that they are ready and that they are prepared for what's out there. And you just being strict and putting them in a bubble is not preparing them. If anything, you're probably hurting them more. And one more thing too, you know, we recently were talking about with my boys. I think one of the things that actually helped them a lot was detasseling. You know, detasseling is kind of a rite of passage for kids in farm country like this. It's a lot of hard work, but you know what? They went and did that, and they were around a lot of your typical public school kids. My boys were saying that was the first time, or that was how they learned what the F word was from detasseling. They heard a kid get angry and yell it, and they knew that there was one, but they had never heard it before. And that was kind of their introduction to that. And so they got to see, you know, where just, you know, a life unregulated, where it leads. And it really turned them off to a lot of things of the world. And I'm glad they got to see that. I was concerned. I was like, yeah, you know what? They are going to be exposed to some things. They're going to hear words they've never heard. They're going to be around some pretty nasty people. But, you know, I was confident that they were showing signs of having, you know, character and being decent kids. And so, you know, when those things happened, it didn't rub off on them. You know, my boys didn't come home saying the F word, and I'm very thankful for that. But at the same time, you know, I'm glad I didn't hide them from it. I'm glad I didn't put them in a bubble, because, you know what, now they're at an age where I can't really, you know, control them. You know, I can to a certain extent because they live in my house, but either of them are making enough money that if they wanted to, and if I want, you know, they could go do their own thing, and there's nothing I can do about it. So, you know, it's all about preparing them. And so, because I know what's out there, I don't want to put them in a bubble. Because I know there's germs out there, I don't want to live in a bubble. I've got to live in a world where I could potentially get sick. And so I just want to have a strong immune system so I can fight those things off. And we need to be the same way with the sin that's out there. Don't live in a bubble, but build some character, learn to have a walk with God, learn how to follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. That way, when you are exposed to sin, it won't cleave to you. It might vex you a little bit. You know, you're going to mess up sometimes, but you can overcome that because you've got a strong spiritual immune system. So I hope this was a help to you. If you're looking for a message on that, I'm going to be preaching a message. It'll probably be a few weeks because I got to finish up 1 John. We got a guest speaker coming, but on riotous children. I think there's some really important things that I want to cover that will hopefully be a help and a blessing to you. And so thank you all for watching. I didn't really pay attention to the live chat. Saw a lot of people getting messages retracted, all that kind of stuff out. Looks like somebody's asking about Josh Duggar. I referenced Josh Duggar, but that guy's so disgusting, I'd rather not talk about him. But I do want to say that, again, I think he's an example of what I'm talking about. he grew up around strictness, but clearly no character development. And look at what happened to him as soon as he was handed something. And so, a good test, you know what his parents should have done with him is they should have stuck him in a room with a bunch of cookies and just not given him any instructions and see what he did. And if they had done something like that, he probably would have went in there and stuffed his face like a ravenous animal. And that would have been a good sign. All right, we better work on this kid. And a lot of parents, they're just taking everything away. They're just removing these things, and they're missing the signs that you've got a little glutton, a little prodigal on your hands. And man, one of these days he's going to get a hold of some tools that he's going to do some real damage with. Watch out for that. Our children are valuable, they're important, and we want to make sure we raise them right. So thank you for watching. We will see you all next week.